You'd think, being a guy who built an entire empire from the ground up, I'd see betrayal coming from miles away. I've spent decades navigating corporate backstabs, watching out for loopholes in contracts, dodging and weaving through competition. What I didn't expect was to be blindsided in my own home. It's almost funny, almost. Monica and I had been married for 22 years. I thought we had it all figured out. I provided for our family, gave her the space to do her thing, even supported her passion projects, like the art classes she took at that community center. But as it turns out, she wasn't just rekindling her love for painting. Nope, she found herself a little muse in the form of James Davidson, some hotshot literature professor who loves to hear himself talk. At first, it was just tiny things. I'm a detail guy. I notice when the usual patterns shift, even if it's subtle. Monica started coming home later, blaming it on extra time in the studio. She was dressing differently, more makeup, new clothes, the kind she hadn't worn in years. When I'd ask about her day, she'd light up talking about this new group project she was a part of, and she'd casually mention James's name like he was some friendly mentor, helping her explore her artistic side. Yeah, right. One day, I get home from work, and there she is, Monica's sitting at the kitchen table, typing away on her phone with that secretive smile. You know the type. The one that suggests she's got a little private joke that doesn't include you. I made a joke about how distracted she seemed, expecting some throwaway excuse. Instead, she jumped like she'd been caught. She brushed it off quickly, said it was just Rachel, our daughter, texting about some wedding details. But I knew better. Rachel's always direct. She calls when she needs something. That nagging feeling started settling in, like a storm brewing. Something wasn't right. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wasn't about to make a move without knowing exactly what game was being played. That's when I decided to start digging. I mean, it's what I do best, right? I find weak spots, figure out where the real threats are, and eliminate them. So I did just that, quietly, systematically. I checked phone records, tracked patterns, and eventually one day, I came across a message that told me everything I needed to know. It was tucked in some innocuous thread about workshop meetings, and James was signing off with, "See you soon, my muse." It hit me like a punch to the gut. Everything clicked into place. The late nights, the excitement, the art classes. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. My wife, the woman I'd built my life around, was involved with this pretentious jerk. And she didn't even have the decency to be clever about it. But the thing is, I didn't flip out. I didn't go smashing things or screaming accusations. That's not my style. I wanted revenge, yeah, but not the messy, explosive kind. I wanted them to feel their lives unravel, thread by thread, the way mine was starting to. That's when I started my own plan. And trust me, if there's anything I'm good at, it's orchestrating a strategy. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. I was going to watch, collect every piece of evidence, and make sure that when I made my move, it wouldn't just be a moment of satisfaction. It would be the downfall they never saw coming. I didn't let on that, I knew. That was the most important thing. If Monica even suspected I was onto her, she'd change her behavior, cover her tracks better. And if I was going to take them both down, I needed them to feel comfortable, safe. I needed her to believe she was getting away with it. So I did something that went against every instinct I had. I played the fool. I started complimenting her more, acted even more oblivious than usual. When she came home late, I'd smile and ask how her art sessions were going, feigning interest in her projects. She'd light up, telling me about inspirations and new techniques, her eyes darting slightly when she mentioned James. She thought she was being subtle. One night, I poured her a glass of wine and asked, "So, this James guy, what's he like?" And let me tell you, I have seen people lie in boardrooms. I've seen executives spin stories so well they could sell ice to Eskimos. But Monica? She was terrible at it. She froze for half a second, just long enough for me to catch it, then forced out this awkward little laugh. Oh, he's just a mentor. Very passionate about literature and art. He really gets people to think differently. I nodded, swirling my drink. Sounds like an interesting guy. Maybe I should meet him sometime. That rattled her. She covered it fast, but not fast enough. Oh, I don't know if you'd like him. He's very intellectual. I almost laughed at how transparent she was. But instead I leaned back, smiled, and said, maybe you should invite him over sometime. I'd love to hear about all these deep conversations you've been having." That put her in a tough spot. She couldn't exactly say no without making it weird, but she also knew James wouldn't want to be anywhere near me. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to come up with a way to avoid it. Finally, she just smiled and changed the subject. That night, after she went to bed, I stayed up in my office, pouring myself a drink and looking through the data I had gathered so far. Phone records, check. Bank statements, check. Social media interactions, check. I already had enough proof to ruin both of them. But I wasn't just going to expose them. No, that would be too easy. I wanted them to destroy themselves. So I started making moves. First, I began shifting assets, slowly, carefully. If Monica was planning to leave me for James, she'd be in for a surprise when she realized she wasn't walking away with half of my empire. I made it look like my company was struggling, leaked a few insider concerns to the right people, just enough to create whispers. Nothing public, just internal murmurs. And Monica? She took the bait. A few days later, I overheard her on the phone. "I don't know, James. Maybe we should wait and see what happens with Alex's business. If things are going bad, the settlement might be smaller than I thought." She didn't realize I was in the next room, listening. And in that moment, any lingering doubt I had about whether or not she was just being manipulated by James disappeared. She wasn't a victim. She was a willing participant. That was fine. It just meant I wouldn't feel an ounce of guilt for what was coming next. Because they thought they were playing me. But the real game? It had only just begun. After that phone call, I knew Monica was exactly where I needed her to be, greedy, eager, and blind. She thought she had the upper hand. That was the first real mistake. I started planting more seeds. A few well-placed late-night phone calls, sighing heavily when I came home, leaving financial reports lying around with red markings over declining revenue and cash flow issues. Nothing too drastic, just enough to make it seem like my empire was on shaky ground. Monica took the bait so fast it was almost embarrassing. A week later, she brought up the topic over dinner, feigning concern like she wasn't already plotting her exit. "Alex, I've been noticing you seem really stressed about work lately. Is everything okay?" I rubbed my temples, playing into the act. "It's just, business has been tough. The market's shifting, and there are some investments that aren't playing out the way I'd hoped." She nodded, acting sympathetic, but I could see it, relief. She thought I was losing my grip. That she could jump ship before things got worse. And just like clockwork, she started moving differently. Monica became more distant, staying out later, pretending she was too tired to talk. If I didn't know better, I'd think she was struggling with guilt. But no, she was just weighing her options, calculating when to make her move. Then I saw it. One night, she left her laptop open while she was in the shower. Now, I don't go through people's things without reason, but let's be real, this wasn't my wife anymore. This was someone actively conspiring against me. I clicked into her email. And there it was. A draft of a message to her lawyer. "I'm considering moving forward with the divorce. My concern is Alex's current financial situation. How do we ensure that I get what I'm entitled to before his business declines further?" Before his business declines further. She was making sure she milked me for everything before she walked away. I sat back in my chair, feeling a strange mix of anger and satisfaction. She was so predictable. And now I had confirmation that she wasn't just emotionally checked out. She was actively planning how to leave while taking the biggest piece of my wealth she could. But she didn't know that I was already 3 steps ahead. That night, I made a few phone calls. First, my lawyers. They were already in the loop. I had briefed them weeks ago. The plan was simple: create a scenario where Monica thought she was walking away with a huge settlement, but in reality, she'd be getting nothing. Second, a financial expert I trusted. We set up a strategy to legally transfer my most valuable assets into shell companies and offshore accounts, making them untouchable in the divorce. To the public, it would look like my empire was struggling. But in reality, I was more protected than ever. Then, I made one last call. To a private investigator. Because while I had enough to expose the affair, I wanted everything. I needed every message, every meeting, every shady transaction between Monica and James Davidson. I wanted to own them. Because when the time came, I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to bury them both. I had Monica right where I wanted her. She thought she was being discreet, that I was too wrapped up in my failing business to see what was happening under my own roof. Meanwhile, James Davidson, the so-called literature professor, was getting bolder. The man had a certain arrogance to him, the type of confidence that comes from years of manipulating women into thinking he was something special. He was the kind of guy who believed he was smarter than everyone else in the room. And that made him reckless. It didn't take long for the investigator to deliver results. Monica and James had been meeting up at a little boutique hotel on the other side of town, one of those overpriced places that prided itself on intimacy and exclusivity. Real classy. The investigator got pictures. A lot of them. One set showed Monica and James having lunch together, leaning in close, her hand on his arm. Another set? Them entering the hotel, arms wrapped around each other like a couple of teenagers sneaking around after curfew. But the best part? James wasn't just stringing Monica along for love. He was after her money, or more accurately, my money. My investigator dug deep and found out that James had a long history of relationships with women who conveniently happened to be wealthy or well-connected. He had done this before, charmed them, made them feel special, convinced them to fund his artistic ventures, and then left them high and dry. It was all so predictable. And now, Monica was his next investment. The first sign came when Monica started talking about dreams. One evening, over dinner, she casually mentioned an idea she'd been thinking about. Wouldn't it be amazing to open a place of our own? Like, an art cafe? A space where people could come, enjoy literature, sip coffee, admire artwork. I chewed my food slowly, pretending to consider it. That's an interesting idea. You thinking of starting a business? She laughed, waving her hand. Oh no, not me. James and I were just discussing how there's a real need for a space like that. He has such an incredible vision, you know. Of course. James had a vision. I leaned back, smiling just enough to seem supportive. Sounds like a big investment. She hesitated for a second before shrugging. Well, yeah. But it could be amazing. We could change lives. That right there? That was the opening I needed. Because Monica might have been good at lying to me, but she wasn't good at lying to herself. She wanted to believe this was about passion, about following a dream. But deep down, she knew James was using her. And I was about to let him. The next few weeks, I played along. I let Monica believe I was distracted, that my business struggles were consuming me. Meanwhile, I was laying the groundwork for their downfall. First, I made sure Monica had the money to invest. That meant subtly shifting assets in a way that made it look like she had access to significant cash. I even made sure she'd stumbled upon a few old joint accounts that she thought I had forgotten about. Then, I pulled some strings. A few city inspectors. Some well-placed rumors about the landlord of a prime cafe location. A couple of suppliers who suddenly had scheduling conflicts with deliveries. I didn't need to shut down their business. I just needed to make sure it bled them dry. And James, being the greedy fool he was, took the bait. One evening, I overheard Monica on the phone with him. Yes, baby, I have the funds. I can pull from the joint account, and it should be enough to cover the deposit and some initial costs. I closed my eyes, letting the satisfaction settle in. Monica thought she was investing in a dream. James thought he was getting a golden parachute. But what they were really getting? A one-way ticket to disaster. Monica wasted no time. Within a week, she drained the joint account and handed over the money to James. I didn't stop her. I even made sure she thought she was being sneaky, like she was pulling one over on me. The cafe lease was signed. Contractors were hired. Supplies were ordered. And James? He was playing the devoted partner, telling her how perfect this was, how their future was finally beginning. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because what neither of them realized was that the moment she moved that money, she had unknowingly walked into a trap. That account? It was tied to several financial obligations that, on paper, made it look like she had committed fraud. Nothing illegal, of course. Just messy. And James? He was about to realize that the cafe he had pinned all his hopes on was never going to turn a profit. Because the second they opened their doors, the problems started. A sudden health inspection flagged issues with the kitchen. The city permit got delayed. Their supplier shipments kept getting misplaced. Customers complained about service, thanks to a few well-placed bad reviews. James, in his arrogance, believed he could fix it. But Monica? She was starting to panic. And that was exactly what I wanted. Monica had no idea what was happening. One minute, she was glowing with excitement, telling Rachel all about this new chapter in her life. The next, everything was unraveling right in front of her. The cafe hadn't even been open a month, and it was already bleeding money. James, ever the con artist, kept brushing off her concerns. It's just a rough start, babe. All businesses go through this. We just need to push through. But Monica wasn't built for struggle. She had never dealt with true financial pressure before. She was used to stability, to my stability. And now, for the first time, she was realizing that James wasn't the safety net she thought he was. The health inspectors kept coming back. The supplier issues weren't getting fixed. Their landlord suddenly started rethinking their lease. Every problem seemed to pile on top of the last, and Monica? She was starting to break. One night, I walked into the kitchen to find her sitting at the table, staring at a pile of invoices. She didn't even hear me come in. I leaned against the counter. Everything okay? She flinched and quickly stacked the papers. Yeah. Just busy. I watched her carefully. That new project of yours giving you trouble? Her jaw tightened. No. Everything's fine. She was lying. And not well. I almost smiled. Because the cracks were forming. And soon, the whole thing was going to collapse. Monica could pretend all she wanted, but I saw it clear as day, she was drowning. And James? He was no better. The cafe wasn't just struggling, it was a money pit. Rent, wages, suppliers, everything was piling up. The grand vision he had sold Monica was slipping through his fingers, and for the first time, he couldn't charm his way out of it. That's when he made his next mistake. One night, Monica left her laptop open again. I wasn't even trying to snoop at that point. She had gotten sloppy. And there it was, an email from James. Subject: need more time. Monica, I know things are tight right now, but we just need to hold on a little longer. I'll find a way to cover this month's losses. Maybe we can move some things around? See if Rachel's wedding fund can help, just for now? We'll put it back as soon as we stabilize. I had to read it twice. He was actually trying to get Monica to pull money from our daughter's wedding fund. I closed the laptop and exhaled slowly. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, this was about protecting Rachel. Monica hadn't responded yet. Maybe she was hesitant, or maybe she was already considering it. Either way, I wasn't going to let it happen. So I did what I do best. I made sure James had no way out. First, I tightened the noose. I called in a favor and made sure their landlord refused any lease renegotiations. Then, I had a friend at the bank review their loan application. Declined. Just like that, their last hope of keeping the business afloat was gone. Then, I set the final trap. I made sure Rachel's wedding planning continued smoothly, untouched by their chaos. Every time Monica hesitated about a big purchase, I reassured her that everything was fine. That the wedding budget was secure. I needed her to believe that nothing had changed, so that when the truth finally came out, it would hit her like a freight train. And James? He was running out of options. He thought he was playing Monica, but in reality, he was doing exactly what I wanted, digging his own grave. James was cornered, and when a man like him is desperate, he makes mistakes. Big ones. The cafe was hemorrhaging money, his debts were stacking up, and Monica was no longer the starry-eyed believer she had been a few months ago. The fights had started, small at first, whispered arguments behind closed doors, but growing louder each time. She was beginning to see James for what he really was, a leech. But before she could cut him loose, he made one last gamble. The wedding fund heist. One afternoon, I got a call from the bank. A routine alert about an attempted withdrawal from Rachel's wedding fund. It wasn't Monica. It was James. That idiot had somehow convinced Monica to give him access to the account, probably promising he'd borrow the money and replace it later. But banks don't just let anyone pull money from secured accounts, not without raising some serious red flags. When Monica got the call asking to confirm the transaction, she panicked. I imagine, for the first time, she truly felt the weight of what she had done. She called James immediately. My investigator had tapped his burner phone by then, and the conversation? Gold. Monica, furious. What the hell are you doing? I told you I'd handle it. James, frustrated. You weren't moving fast enough. We need the money now, Monica. Do you want this place to shut down? Monica, you think Rachel's wedding is your personal ATM. Alex will. She stopped herself, but it was clear what she meant. James, scoffing. Alex will what? He's too busy running his sinking company to even notice. That was the moment I knew. He still thought I was in the dark. Perfect. Because now Monica was in damage control mode. And James? He had no clue that I was about to make my move. Setting the stage for the final blow. Rachel's wedding was only weeks away. The guest list was finalized, the venue booked, the payments locked in. Everything was perfect. Except for Monica. She was unraveling, trying to keep James's mess from colliding with the one event she couldn't afford to ruin. But what she didn't know was that I was counting on this moment. Because at Rachel's wedding, everything would come crashing down. Rachel's wedding was a masterpiece, elegant, extravagant, the kind of event Monica had always dreamed of for her daughter. Every detail was flawless, every guest was dressed to impress. But beneath the surface, Monica was a wreck. She smiled for the cameras, played the part of the devoted mother, but I could see it, her hands trembling when she thought no one was watching, her eyes darting around like she expected something to go wrong at any second. And she was right. I had made sure of it. James wasn't there, of course. Monica had been distancing herself from him, too ashamed to bring him into Rachel's world. But that didn't stop him from making one final desperate mistake. He was drowning in debt, had no way to keep the cafe afloat, and now he had lost access to Monica's money. So he did what all conmen do when their scams fall apart, he got reckless. While guests toasted to Rachel and her new husband, I received a message from my investigator. James had been caught trying to take out a loan under Monica's name. He had forged her signature, used her documents, and when the bank flagged it as suspicious, he had the nerve to argue with them. Security footage, phone calls, transaction records, it was all neatly packaged and ready for me to use. And the timing? Couldn't have been better. During the reception, I made my move. I had already arranged for one of my lawyers, disguised as just another guest, to pull Monica aside. He handed her an envelope, whispered something in her ear, and walked away. I didn't have to watch her open it to know what was inside. Copies of James's attempted fraud, proof of his debts, records of every shady transaction he had made in the past 6 months. Every single lie she had told herself about him was now staring back at her in black and white. She looked up at me across the room, eyes wide with panic. I raised my glass in a silent toast. And that's when she cracked. She tried to keep it together, but Rachel saw something was wrong. She pulled Monica aside, whispering, asking what had happened. Monica shook her head, tears forming, and that's when Rachel turned to me. She knew deep down that I had something to do with this. I met her gaze, calm and steady. Then she asked, "Dad, what did you do?" And I simply said, "I protected you." Monica was spiraling, but the wedding wasn't the place to fall apart, not yet. She forced a smile, whispered something to Rachel, and excused herself. But I knew exactly where she was going. She needed a moment alone, a quiet place to process the undeniable truth, that James had never loved her, that he had used her, drained her, and now when she had nothing left to give, he had tried to steal from her. And worse? He had done it so sloppily that even the bank had caught on. I followed at a distance, staying just far enough behind to watch it unfold. She stepped outside, clutching the envelope, her breathing uneven, her hands shaking. Then, like a woman possessed, she pulled out her phone and called him. I had my investigator recording everything. "James," she hissed the moment he picked up, voice sharp, panicked. "What the hell did you do?" "Monica, listen, I can explain. You tried to take out a loan in my name? In my name. Are you insane? Calm down, baby, it's not what you think. Don't call me that. You promised me, James. You swore we'd get through this, that we were a team, and now I find out you were trying to scam me just like all those other women." Silence. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. And that was it. That was the moment Monica broke. She let out a short, bitter laugh, one of those hollow sounds people make when they realize they've been played for a fool. "I gave up everything for you," she whispered. My marriage, my family, my security. For what? A con artist. Monica, baby, listen. Click. She hung up. I watched as she stood there, shaking, staring down at her phone like she didn't even recognize the woman she had become. For the first time, she knew she had lost everything. And that's when I stepped forward. She turned, startled, and when she saw me standing there, calm and composed, her face twisted in anger. You knew, she accused, voice raw. You knew this whole time. I didn't deny it. Of course I did. Her lip trembled, her hands balling into fists. You let me destroy myself. I tilted my head. No, Monica. You did that all on your own. She let out a shaky breath, eyes searching mine, looking for something, sympathy maybe. A shred of kindness. A lifeline. But there was nothing left between us except the consequences of her choices. Inside, the wedding celebration continued. Laughter, music, clinking glasses. A reminder of the life she had walked away from. And as she stood there, drowning in regret, I walked back inside without another word. Because Monica wasn't my problem anymore. Monica didn't come back inside right away. She stayed out there alone, probably running through every excuse, every lie she had told herself to justify what she'd done. But there was nothing left to justify. Meanwhile, inside, Rachel was watching me. She had seen Monica rush out, seen the tension, seen everything. And for the first time I could tell, she wasn't sure whose side she was supposed to be on. I didn't pressure her. I didn't have to. Because the truth was about to do all the work for me. It happened fast. One of my security guys, who I had stationed discreetly at the venue, came up to me, phone in hand, expression unreadable. Sir, we've got something. I took the phone and saw it, James at the airport. He wasn't just skipping town, he was running. My investigator had been tracking his movements all day. After Monica's call, he must have realized his time was up. He'd booked a last-minute flight, ditched his car in a long-term parking lot, and was already through security. No luggage, no goodbyes. Just a coward making a break for it. I had expected this, but watching it unfold in real time? That was satisfying. But the best part? James didn't know that I had already made sure his exit wouldn't be clean. I turned to my security guy. Call the fraud division. Give them what we have. He nodded and walked off. Within 20 minutes, James Davidson was being pulled out of the airport security line, a federal agent reading him his rights as people stared and whispered. By the end of the night, he'd be sitting in a holding cell, trying to explain why he had multiple fraudulent loan attempts tied to his name. And Monica? She was about to find out in the worst way possible. She came back inside eventually, eyes red, face pale. She tried to slip back into the wedding like nothing had happened, but Rachel was waiting. Mom. Monica stopped dead in her tracks. Rachel was standing there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She had heard enough whispers, pieced together enough fragments of conversation. And now? She wanted the truth. Tell me what's going on, Rachel demanded. Now. Monica hesitated, probably hoping to find some version of the story that made her look less pathetic. But then a news alert popped up on someone's phone, and suddenly, murmurs spread through the room. James Davidson. Arrested at the airport. Fraud charges. Monica's face went white. Rachel turned back to me, eyes sharp, realization dawning. You did this. I met her gaze, calm and steady. I protected you. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, Monica did something I will never forget. She turned on James. Right then and there. She spun toward Rachel, tears in her eyes, shaking her head furiously. I didn't know. I swear, Rachel, I didn't know he lied to me. I thought. Rachel's voice was ice. You gave him access to my wedding fund. Monica flinched like she'd been slapped. And that was it. That was the moment Rachel made her choice. She stepped away from her mother and turned to me. The wedding was still going on, but for Monica, the night was over. She stood there frozen, looking at Rachel like she wanted to say something, anything, to fix this. But there was nothing left to say. Rachel's eyes burned with disappointment. The kind of look a child gives when they realize their mother isn't who they thought she was. Not just a mistake, not just a bad decision, but a complete betrayal. The whispers were growing around us. News spread fast. Guests were checking their phones, glancing at Monica, piecing things together. James wasn't just a cheater or a scammer now, he was a criminal. And Monica? She was the woman who had enabled him. Rachel shook her head, her voice quieter this time, but somehow even harsher. You were really going to let him take from me? Monica finally found her voice. Rachel, I didn't know. I never meant for it to get this far. I let out a breath, tilting my head slightly. That's funny. Because I remember when you told James you'd handle it. That sounds like intent to me. Monica's head snapped toward me, her face crumbling. I could see it now, the weight of everything crashing down on her all at once. James was gone. Her reputation was in flames. And worst of all, Rachel had chosen me. She turned back to our daughter, eyes pleading. Please, baby, you have to understand. I thought I was following my heart, I thought James. Rachel took a step back. Don't. Monica's lips quivered. You lied to me. To Dad. To everyone, Rachel said, her voice cold. I trusted you. And you threw it all away for him. Monica wiped at her face, but the tears wouldn't stop. Rachel, please. You have to believe me. Rachel looked at her mother for a long moment. Then, in a voice so quiet it barely carried over the room, she whispered. I don't. And just like that, Monica broke. A soft, choked sob escaped her throat as she reached out, but Rachel turned away. Then, as if the universe itself had decided to deliver the final blow, one of my security guys came up to me and handed me a folder. Right on schedule. Sir, he said loudly enough for Monica to hear, the financial reviews came in. The lawyers have confirmed. She walks away with nothing. Dead silence. Monica's breath hitched. She spun toward me. What? I opened the folder dramatically, flipping through the pages like it was just another business deal. Well, let's see, since all major assets were secured under company holdings prior to the divorce being finalized, and considering the fraudulent withdrawals from our accounts, it turns out. I snapped the folder shut and looked her straight in the eyes. You're broke, Monica. She staggered back. Her mouth opened like she was going to argue, to scream, but nothing came out. Because she knew. I had taken everything. No mansion. No savings. No cafe. No James. Her world had just collapsed in the span of one night. I stepped forward, my voice low enough that only she could hear. You thought you were playing me, I murmured. But I let you build your own destruction. I just made sure the foundation was weak enough to crumble when the time was right. Her breathing was erratic, her shoulders shaking. You did this on purpose, she whispered, horrified. I smiled. Of course I did. She took a step forward, fists clenched, voice desperate. Alex, please. But I was done. I turned to Rachel, offering her my hand. Let's go. Rachel hesitated for only a moment before taking it. And Monica? She watched us walk away. Alone. With nothing. Monica didn't try to stop us. She just stood there, shaking, silent, broken. Watching as Rachel walked away with me, leaving her behind. The wedding carried on, but Monica was gone. She slipped out quietly, humiliated beyond words. A few guests whispered, a few stared, but no one stopped her. No one offered her comfort. Because everyone knew. She had destroyed herself. I didn't think about her after that. Not that night. Not when I danced with my daughter at her wedding. Not when I watched her smile and laugh and celebrate. For the first time in months, I felt peace. The weight of it all had been lifted. James was in custody, Monica was ruined, and my daughter? She was safe. That was all that mattered. Monica's new reality. She didn't leave town immediately. She had nowhere to go, no one to run to. The friends who used to sip wine with her in our mansion? Gone. The people who had praised her passion and newfound freedom when she left me for James? Nowhere to be found. She tried to keep the cafe open, tried to salvage something from the wreckage, but without money, without suppliers, without James, it was a lost cause. 2 weeks later, it shut down permanently. Her name was tarnished. She couldn't get a loan, couldn't find an investor willing to touch her. No one wanted to associate with the woman who had been publicly exposed as a fool and an accomplice. She sold her jewelry. Moved into a tiny rental. For the first time in decades, she had to work. Word was, She took a job at an art supply store. A poetic little ending, surrounded by the passion she had thrown away her life for. Rachel never spoke to her. I think that was the part that broke Monica the most. James's fate. The thing about men like James? They're not built for consequences. He snitched. The moment he realized how deep he was in, he started cutting deals. He blamed mental health struggles, claimed Monica had pressured him to start the cafe, said he was just a desperate man in love. The authorities didn't buy it, but they took what they needed. He wasn't locked up forever, white-collar criminals never are, but by the time he got out, he had nothing. I made sure of it. No credit. No investments. A black mark on his name that would follow him wherever he went. Last I heard, he skipped town. Good. Let him run. Let him look over his shoulder for the rest of his life. Because no matter where he goes, he'll know he crossed the wrong man. My future. For months, I expected to feel something. Regret. Guilt. Pity. I felt none of it. I had protected my daughter. I had destroyed the people who had tried to take from me. I had walked away untouched while they crumbled. And in the end, I built something better. I invested in real businesses. I expanded my empire. I poured money into organizations that helped victims of con artists like James. I used my power for something lasting. And I moved on. Because I won. And Monica? She would spend the rest of her life knowing that. The months after Monica's downfall were quiet. Not empty, just quiet. The kind of silence that comes after a storm, when the wreckage is settled, and all that's left to do is move forward. It wasn't the silence of loneliness or loss. It was peace. For the first time in years, I woke up without the weight of doubt. No second-guessing glances, no wondering if the person lying next to me was hiding something. The house felt different. Lighter. Every room carried a different energy now, no lingering shadows, no whispers behind closed doors. It was my home again. I didn't realize how much of myself I had lost in the years leading up to this moment. How much time I had spent watching, calculating, waiting. That slow creeping feeling of betrayal had been gnawing at me for far longer than I wanted to admit. But now, it was gone. And in its place, there was clarity. Monica was nothing more than a name in my past. A lesson, maybe. A mistake, definitely. But not a regret. Because in the end, she had done this to herself. Rachel thrived in the months that followed. It was almost strange, watching her step into the world I had built with that same hunger in her eyes. She had always been sharp, always had the potential, but before, she had been hesitant, unsure of where she fit. But now? Now she was ruthless. She asked the right questions. She studied every deal, every investment, every board meeting like it was a battlefield she had to conquer. It wasn't just about inheriting my empire anymore, it was about building her own. And I let her. She never asked about Monica. She never spoke about her, never reached out. But I knew she thought about it. Sometimes I'd catch her scrolling through old pictures on her phone, her expression unreadable. She was mourning in her own way, not just her mother, but the version of her mother she had once believed in. But she never called. And Monica never came. Then one evening, months after Monica had faded into nothing, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another business inquiry, another deal waiting to be made. But something told me to answer. I knew who it was before she even spoke. Alex. Monica's voice was different. Hollow. Weak. Not the smooth, confident tone I once knew. It had been worn down by time, by disappointment, by the slow realization that there was no one left to run to. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch, waiting. I didn't know if you'd answer, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. I still said nothing. She let out a soft, shaking breath. I don't know why I called. I did. Monica had spent her whole life surrounded by people. She had never been alone. Even when she left me, even when she walked straight into James's arms, she had still been cushioned by attention, by validation, by the illusion of belonging. But now? She had nothing. Her friends, the ones who used to sip wine with her and gossip about their husbands? Gone. The people who had praised her new beginning with James, the ones who had told her she was following her heart? Nowhere to be found. Her reputation was ashes. James had left her in ruins. The cafe was long gone. The money was gone. The life she had envisioned when she walked away from me? Gone. And now, standing in the wreckage of her own choices, she had done the only thing she had left. She had called me. I didn't call to ask for anything, she continued after a long pause. I don't know. Do you ever think about what we had? Her voice cracked on the last word. It wasn't calculated. It wasn't manipulative. It was genuine. For the first time, Monica wasn't trying to spin a story. She wasn't trying to salvage something or guilt me into feeling sorry for her. She was just broken. And maybe, in some past life, that would have meant something to me. Maybe there was a version of myself that would have softened at the sound of her voice, that would have let nostalgia twist the truth into something more forgiving. But that man was gone. I leaned back in my chair, swirling the whiskey in my glass, staring out at the city skyline, the empire I had built, the life I had reclaimed. Then I let out a quiet chuckle, low and deep. No, Monica, I said, my voice calm, steady. I don't. The silence on the other end was heavy. I could hear her breathing, unsteady, like she wanted to say something else. Maybe she wanted to apologize. Maybe she wanted to lash out. Maybe she just wanted to hear my voice a little longer, to hold on to the last thread of connection she had to the life she threw away. But I didn't care. I ended the call. And that was it. Monica was gone. For the first time, I truly felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No pity. Just nothing. She had burned every bridge. And now, she was drowning in the ocean she had thrown herself into. And me? I was still standing. I had my empire. My daughter. My legacy. And Monica? She had her regrets. Nothing more. Nothing less. Years passed. The scandal that had once consumed my life faded into history, just another cautionary tale whispered among those who had once admired Monica and James. Life moved forward, as it always does, erasing old names and replacing them with new ones. People forgot. But I didn't. Not because I held on to the past, but because the past had shaped everything that came next. Rachel became everything I had hoped for. She wasn't just my daughter, she was my legacy. She built her own empire, learning from my successes, my mistakes, my ruthless precision. She never let herself be blindsided the way I had. She saw people for what they were, knew how to read their weaknesses, how to stay ahead. She was me, but sharper. And Monica? She became nothing. She moved to Oregon eventually, scraping together whatever remnants of a life she could manage. She never remarried, never built anything new. For a while, she tried to regain some dignity, taking up painting again, teaching art classes in some local community center. But the world had moved on. The people she once called friends had long since forgotten her. She reached out once more, years later. A letter, this time. No plea for money, no demand for sympathy, just a few short paragraphs, written in shaky handwriting. She wrote about Rachel. Asked how she was, if she was happy. Said she missed her, even though she knew Rachel would never forgive her. She didn't ask for another chance, only hoped that one day, Rachel might see her again. I never showed Rachel the letter. It wasn't my place to stop her if she ever chose to reconnect. But I knew my daughter. She had made her choice years ago. Rachel didn't ask about her mother. And I never offered the information. Because some things don't need to be spoken aloud. As for James, he was forgotten. The legal battle ended with a slap on the wrist, a few years of monitored probation, but his name was ruined. No university would hire him. No investor would touch him. His old habits caught up with him eventually, gambling, drinking, making promises he couldn't keep. Last I heard, he was working odd jobs in some third-rate city, jumping from one failed scheme to another. I had considered tracking him down once. Just to see. Just to watch him squirm, knowing exactly how far he had fallen. But then I realized, I didn't care. He was already living the worst punishment possible. Irrelevance.